Today's training will cover offer versus serve in school meals. For a school utilizing offer versus serve, the student can decline any food component except part of the fruit or vegetable component. We will discuss breakfast and lunch throughout this presentation. But as a general overview, students must select at least 3 food items at breakfast and at least 3 food components at lunch. This must include at least a half a cup of fruit or vegetable or a combination at each meal. Students, servers, and cashiers must be able to identify what constitutes a reimbursable meal. The NSLP regulation at 7 CFR 210-10A2 requires that schools identify near or at the beginning of serving lines what foods constitute unit price reimbursable meals. Schools using OVS must also identify what a student must select in order to have a reimbursable meal under offer versus serve. Students and their parents or guardians need to be aware of what is included in school meals. Parents or guardians so they can reinforce nutrition education messages at home, and students so they know how to select a reimbursable meal. Signage and menus should provide clear information about allowable choices. This will help students easily build a reimbursable meal and is especially important to avoid problems at the point of service. Schools are expected to conduct training for cashiers and serving line staff so they can help students select the required food components or food items in the quantities needed for reimbursable lunches and breakfast. Annual training is required to meet the professional standards requirements. Signage is not required for field trips, breakfast in the classroom, and other venues where signage may be problematic. However, other methods should be used to inform students what choices they have. There are a number of different systems used by schools to offer their students reimbursable meals. For example, a school may have cafeteria style service, kiosks, meals in the classroom, and vending machines. At the senior high school level, offer versus serve is required at lunch unless the school or SFA demonstrates to the state agency that their system does not accommodate offer versus serve. This is most common at residential child care institutions or CCIs. Schools are strongly encouraged to modify their meal service system to incorporate offer versus serve to the extent practical. Prepackaged meals are allowed at all age and grade levels. For senior high schools, if this is the only system available for the National School Lunch Program, offer versus serve for all or some components must be implemented unless a school was approved by the state agency to not implement offer versus serve. Even with such approval, these schools are encouraged to have some food components, food items, with choices and or the option to decline, such as fruit or milk. If these meals are offered as part of breakfast in a classroom, field trips, or for students leaving the campus for work study, offer versus serve is not required, even at the high school level. Another common finding is seen during a meals at disciplinary centers or for lunch detention. All SFAs must offer all students, even those in detention, a choice for offer versus serve, where the student is allowed to make selections on a menu, or the SFA must provide the complete reimbursable meal. A 3 component detention lunch plate is not acceptable. For all grade groups, 1 cup of fluid milk must be offered daily. It may be used as a beverage, on cereal, or used in part for each purpose. The weekly minimum amount of 5 cups of milk may be met by offering the daily minimum of 1 cup. There's also a daily requirement to offer a variety of at least 2 milk choices. For this component to be credited for offer versus serve, the students must select at least 1 cup of fluid milk. While water may be made available to students during meal service, SFA shall not promote or offer water or other beverages as an alternative selection to fluid milk on the meal service line. Water is not a food component or food item for the reimbursable meal. Although not part of a reimbursable meal, during emergencies, potable water must still be made available to students as part of the school food service. If water fountains are closed due to health and safety concerns, consider offering bottled water or other safe options. If alternative dispensing options are considered, send LDH plans for pre-approval prior to implementation. In emergency situations such as these, bottled water is an allowable cost. So let's take a closer look at the components and item requirements for breakfast and lunch. At breakfast, there are three components that must be offered on the serving line every day: milk, grain, meat alternate, and fruit. All three components must be available to all children who come through the serving line. At lunch, five components must be offered: milk, grain, fruit, vegetables, and meat alternate. Foods from each of these components must be offered on the serving line every day. If the food item you are planning to serve for one component did not come in, is not finished cooking in time, or you run out while on the line, you have to make sure you put another food item from the same component on the line in its place. The components must be available to all children from the first to the last, even though not all children will take every component. If all the components are not available for every child to choose from, the school will not be able to claim reimbursement, money back, for any of the meals served that day. Now that we've discussed food components, let's talk more about food items. A food item is the food that is offered to meet the component requirement. In this slide, strawberries are offered as food item for the fruit component. Toast is the food item offered as the grain component, and fluid milk is the item offered as the milk component. Although offer versus serve is optional at all grade levels in the school breakfast program, many schools still utilize it at all grade levels due to the reduced waste and cost savings. The meal pattern for breakfast consists of three food components: fruits or vegetable substitution, grains or meat alternates, and milk. The age grade groups for breakfast are K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. There is overlap between the age grade group requirements, which can allow for a K through 8 or a K through 12 breakfast menu. At breakfast, there are three components that must be offered on the serving line every day: milk, grain, meat alternate, and fruit. All three components must be available to all children who come through the serving line. Here, we see the daily and weekly minimum requirements of the fruit, vegetables, grain, or meat alternates, and fluid milk components by age grade groups for breakfast. The component, which may be substituted with vegetables, the fruit component, which may be substituted with vegetables, is a minimum of 1 cup per day for every age or grade group. The grains, meat alternate component is 1 ounce equivalent per day. However, the weekly minimums vary by age grade group. Reminder, at least 80% of grains offered weekly must meet the whole grain rich criteria specified in FNS guidance, and the remaining grain items offered must be enriched. For the combined grains or meat alternates meal components, schools may choose to offer grains, meat alternates, or a combination of both to meet the combined component requirement. Fluid milk is also the same for each age grade group, requiring 1 cup of fluid milk from a choice of milks per day. For reference, this chart shows the weekly requirements for a 5-day school week. If you have 4-day weeks, you will need to reference the 4-day meal pattern requirements. The regulations for school breakfast program fruit component can be found as 7 CFR 220.8C2I. Must offer fruits daily as part of the breakfast menu. Fresh, frozen, or dried or canned and light syrup, water, or fruit juice may be offered. Vegetables may be offered in place of all or part of the required fruits. 1 day per school week may offer any vegetables, including starchy vegetables. 2 or more days per school week must offer at least 2 different vegetable subgroups. All fruits are credited based on their volume as served, except that dried fruit credits as twice the volume. Only pasteurized, full strength, 100% fruit juice may be offered, and it may be credited to meet no more than 1/2 of the fruit component. The smallest creditable amount for the fruits component is 1/8 cup. Substituting vegetables for fruits at school breakfast. The final rule continues to allow schools to substitute vegetables for fruits at school breakfast and simplifies the vegetable variety requirement. Schools that choose to substitute vegetables for fruits once a week may offer any vegetable, including a starchy vegetable. Schools that choose to substitute vegetables for fruits more than once a week must offer vegetables from at least 2 different subgroups. As a reminder, the vegetable subgroups include dark green, red orange, beans, peas, and lentils, starchy, and other vegetables. The regulations for school breakfast program combine grains and meat alternates components can be found at 7 CFR 220.8C2III. Schools must offer grains, meat alternates, or a combination of both to meet the daily and weekly ounce equivalents for this combined component. Meat alternates offered at breakfast count toward the combined grains and meat alternates component. Refer to the 2024 final rule, Child Nutrition Programs, Meal Patterns consistent with the 2020 to 2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. At least 80% of grains offered weekly must meet the whole grain rich criteria. Whole grain rich is the term designated by FNS to indicate that the grain content of a product is between 50 and 100% whole grain. The remaining grain items offered must be enriched. The regulations for the school breakfast program fluid milk requirements can be found at 7 CFR 220.AD. Must offer students a variety, at least 2 different options. Milk varieties may be unflavored or flavored. Unflavored milk must be offered at each meal service. Milk may be whole, reduced fat 2%, low fat 1%, or fat free skim. Lactose free and reduced lactose fluid milk may also be offered. Flavored milk must contain no more than 10 grams of added sugars per 8 fluid ounces. Must have vitamins A and D at levels specified by the FDA, and it must be pasteurized. Let's discuss the basics for offer versus serve. At least 4 food items must be offered. All students at any grade level must select at least 3 food items. If selected, the grains or meat alternates offered for this component and milk must be in the daily minimum required amount. And for the fruit component, the student must select at least a half a cup of fruit or vegetables. For example, the school may offer 1 ounce equivalent cereal, a half a cup of juice, a half a cup of berries, and 8 ounces of milk as the four food items. Under offer versus serve, the student could select cereal, milk, and a half a cup of juice for a reimbursable breakfast. Again, if choices of food items within the components are offered, the menu planner must indicate what choices or combinations of choices the student may select, including any minimum or maximum number that may be taken. For example, if 4 half-a-cup servings are offered for the fruit component, the menu planner must allow the student to select a full cup, but must also indicate that at least a half a cup of fruit is required for a reimbursable meal. If the menu planner chooses, under this example, the student could be allowed to take up to all four choices. At breakfast, in addition to the food component requirements, there are also food item requirements. Not only must each of the three components be offered, but four food items must be offered when utilizing offer versus serve. It is up to the person who plans the menu to determine how the food items will be offered. In this example, we have a half a cup of strawberries and a half a cup of juice to meet the 1 cup fruit component. These are each counted as an item, so we have two items in the fruit component. We have 1 slice of toast and 1 cup of milk. These are the other two food items. Therefore, we have four food items from three components. The menu planner may choose to count a 2 ounce equivalent grain food item as one or two food items at breakfast. A grain item selected under offer versus serve must be at least 1 ounce equivalent. A cup, a half an ounce equivalent muffin will only count as one item, whereas 2 ounce equivalent muffin can count as two items. Smoothies with fruit and milk are another popular combination food offer at breakfast. If there is at least 1 cup of milk and at least a half a cup of fruit or juice in the smoothie may count as two food items for purposes of offer versus serve. A student would need to select one additional food item in order to have three total items and a reimbursable meal. Please refer to the Policy Memo SP 40-2019 for questions and answers related to smoothies in child nutrition programs found at the link above. While offer versus serve is optional for all grade levels at breakfast, USDA requires schools that serve 9th through 12th grades to use offer versus serve at lunch. Offer versus serve is optional at lunch for all other grade levels. However, many schools choose to use offer versus serve with all grades due to the reduced waste and cost savings. Offer versus serve must be available for students at senior high schools as defined by the state educational agency. Alpha versus serve is optional at middle and elementary schools as defined by the state educational agency. Alpha versus serve is not allowed for the National School Lunch Program snack service. Alpha versus serve is optional for summer meals offered through the seamless summer option of the National School Lunch Program. The meal pattern for lunches consists of 5 food components: fruits, vegetables, grains, meats, meat alternate, fluid milk. The age grade groups for lunches are K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. Schools must always offer all 5 food components in at least the minimum required quantities. A food item is a food offered within the 5 food components. Examples: a hamburger patty on a bun is one food item with 2 of the 5 food components: meat, meat alternates, and grains. Separate, a half a cup servings of peaches, applesauce, and pears are 3 food items that represent one component: fruit. Under offer versus serve at lunch, a student must take at least 3 components in the required quantities. One selection must be at least a half a cup total from either the fruits or vegetables component. Depending on the planned menu, the student may need to select more than one food item to have the minimum quantity needed for a component to be credited. Again, components are the food groups that must be offered every day with each meal. At lunch, 5 components must be offered: milk, grain, fruits, vegetables, and meat, meat alternate. Fruit, foods from each of these 5 components must be offered on the serving line every day. If the food item you are planning to serve for one component did not come in, is not finished cooking in time, or you run out while on the line, you have to make sure you put another food item from the same component on the line in its place. The components must be available to all children from the first to the last, even though not all children will take every component. As we said earlier, if all the components are not available for every child to choose from, the school will not be able to claim reimbursement, money back, from any of the meals served that day. Here is the overview of the components and requirements for lunch by age, grade groups. As a reminder, there is no option to do a combined K through 12 age grade groups for the National School Lunch Program, as there is for the School Breakfast Program. There is some overlap between K through 5 and 6 through 8 for lunch. There are daily and weekly requirements for meat, meat alternates, and grains. Reminder, at least 80% of grains offered weekly must meet the whole grain rich criteria specified in FNS guidance, and the remaining grains items offered must be enriched. There are daily requirements for fruit, vegetables, and fluid milk. As a reminder, this is based off a 5 school day week. Weekly requirements are adjusted accordingly for a 4-day school week. A common finding is that a K through 12 school will serve K through 8 the required portions and forget that 9 through 12 has a higher requirement. This is especially an issue with the fruits and vegetable requirements being higher at lunch. Under offer versus serve, all students at any grade level must select at least 3 of 5 food components. And for the fruit and vegetable components, one of the choices selected must be at least a half a cup serving of the fruits or vegetables component, or a half a cup total servings of both fruits and vegetables. If only 3 components are selected and 2 of these are fruit and vegetable, the student may only select a half a cup portion for the fruit or vegetable. For the other 2 components, the student must select at least the minimum daily required serving of the components for them to be counted. For example, students in the 5th grade wants to select milk, a half a cup of fruit, and a half a cup of vegetable. In grades K through 5 and 6 through 8, if a student selects the half a cup of fruit, they are selecting the full component of fruit and thus only have to select a half a cup of vegetable for offer versus serve. And if grains, meat, meat alternates, and milk are selected, the student must select at least the daily half a cup of fruit and or vegetable minimum requirement. For K through 5 and 6 through 8, 3/4 cup and for 9 through 12, 1 cup. 3 food components are required for an adequate, nutritious meal for students and to warrant the federal reimbursement. Within each component, different food items may be offered, giving students many combinations for building a reimbursable meal. An important part of offer versus serve at lunch is knowing what counts as a full component. A full component is the full serving size of the component. If you look at this chart, what is the full daily serving size for the vegetable components for grades K through 8? 3/4 cup per day. What about for grades 9 through 12? A full serving of vegetables is 1 cup. If you look at the fruit component, what is the full daily serving size for grades 9 through 12? 1 cup. What about grades K through 8? A half a cup. What is the minimum full component of meats for grades 9 through 12? 2 ounces. The reason this is important is that when a school allows offer versus serve and a student of any grade chooses a half a cup of vegetables as 1 component, or if a 9th through 12th grade student chooses a half a cup of fruit as 1 component, this is not a full serving for those grade groups. Again, a full serving of vegetables is either 3/4 cup or 1 cup. A full serving of fruits for grades K through 8 is a half a cup. So those grades, if a student takes a half a cup of fruit, that is the full serving size of the fruit component. But if a high school student takes a half a cup of fruit, that is not the full serving size. When the student takes a half a cup of fruit or vegetable and this is not the full serving size of that component for their grade, the other 2 components they choose with offer versus serve must be the full serving. The regulations for the National School Lunch Program fruit component can be found at 7 CFR 210.10C2I. Must offer fruits daily as part of the lunch menu. Fruits that are fresh, frozen, or dried, or canned in light syrup, water, or fruit juice may be offered. All fruits are credited based on their volume as served, except that dried fruit credits as twice the volume. Only pasteurized, full strength, 100% fruit juice may be offered, and it may be credited to meet no more than 1/2 of the fruit's component. The smallest creditable amount for the fruits component is 1/8 cup. The regulations for National School Lunch Program vegetable component can be found at 7 CFR 210.10C2II. Schools must offer vegetables daily as part of the lunch menu. Fresh, frozen, or canned vegetables and dried beans, peas, and lentils may be offered to meet this requirement. All vegetables are credited based on their volume as served, except raw leafy greens credit as half the volume served. Pasteurized, full strength, 100% vegetable juice may be offered to meet no more than 1/2 of the vegetables component. Vegetables offered at lunch over the course of the week must include the vegetable subgroups. The smallest creditable amount for the vegetable component is 1/8 cup. Vegetables offerings at lunch over the course of the week must include dark green, red, orange, beans, peas, and lentils, starchy, other vegetables. The regulations for the National School Lunch Program grains component can be found at 7 CFR 210.10C2II. Schools must offer grains daily as part of the lunch menu. At least 80% of grains offered weekly must meet the whole grain rich criteria. Whole grain rich is a term designated by FNS to indicate that the grain content of a product is between 50 and 100% whole grain. The remaining grain items offered must be enriched. Ounce equivalents are used to determine the amount of creditable grains. 1/4 ounce equivalent is the smallest amount allowable to be credited toward the grains requirement. Limit grain-based desserts to 2-ounce equivalent or less weekly for all grade groups. The regulations for the National School Lunch Program grains component can be found at 7 CFR 210.10 C2IV. Schools must offer meat alternates daily. The quantity must be the edible portion as served. Schools without daily choices should not serve any one meat alternate or form of meat alternates more than 3 times in the same week. If a portion size does not meet the daily requirements for a particular age grade group, schools may supplement it with another meat alternate to meet the full requirement. The regulations for the National School Lunch Program fluid milk requirements can be found at 7 CFR 210.10D, and it must offer students a variety, at least 2 different options. Milk varieties may be unflavored or flavored. Unflavored milk must be offered at each meal service. Milk may be whole, reduced fat 2%, low fat 1%, or fat-free skim. Lactose-free and reduced lactose fluid milk may also be offered. Flavored milk must contain no more than 10 grams of added sugars per 8 ounces. Must have vitamins A and D at levels specified by the FDA, and it must be pasteurized. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact the state agency staff at the Louisiana Department of Education Division of Nutrition Support at 225-342-9661, or send us an email at childnutritionprograms@la.gov. Thank you.